Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career. Today on the podcast, we have Professor Pete Alexander. Professor Pete is a recovering, hard-driving leader with over 35 years of sales, marketing, educational, and entrepreneurial experiences. He has successfully battled the negative effects of stress head-on and developed the Lighten stress management model that will motivate you and your team to take action in only a few minutes per day. After learning the stress management techniques he facilitates, participants can better become leaders teams want to follow rather than hide from. He's on the mission to help leaders better protect their health and handle challenging situations with grace. Professor Pete, thanks for being on, man.
Raul, thank you so much for having me on the show.
I'm excited for our topic today, as well as to discuss a little bit more about your history. So, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as founders, as leaders, or even if you're working in a company and you're leading a team or you're under a high stress environment, we're always going to be facing those internal triggers when it comes to external factors of stress, deadlines, times, lack of resources, etc., even at home or even at work. So the main topic, obviously, stress, but I want to dive in regards to your story behind stress and then why it's so critical and why you made it your life's work at this point.
Sure. Well, thank you for asking. Well, stress and I have had a very long relationship with each other. It started with I was in a dysfunctional childhood, but really where it came to a head was back in 2008. And it was a perfect storm of stressful activities that culminated in my diagnosis with stress-induced diabetes. Yet, I didn't listen to my body about what stress was doing to it. Instead, what I did was, like most of us entrepreneurs, you keep burning the candle at both ends. Mm-hmm. And I did that for another 10 years.
Wow.
Until in 2018, I ended up in the emergency room with a severe case of diabetic ketoacidosis. And for your listeners who don't know what that is, my body was actually eating itself alive because of my stress.
Oh, wow.
My blood sugars were so high that the medical glucometers couldn't read it, meaning that it was 8 to 10 times higher than it was supposed to be. The doctor said I was 1 hour from being comatose. And then I've spent 3 days in ICU after that, the only time I've ever been in ICU, because I had to recover from that experience. And here's the crazy thing, Raul. So I was working for a medical device company at the time. And I was working on, a whole bunch of different projects, but I had this one that was super high profile. And at about 6 a.m. on my second day in ICU, my boss at the time texts me at about 6 a.m. And the nurses were poking me every half an hour. So I was pretty much awake. You don't sleep much in hospitals. And so she texts me and she says, "You have a webinar you need to run at 8 o'clock. What are you going to do about it?" Yeah, I know. And so, but here's the crazy thing. She knew that I was in the hospital in ICU. And I grabbed my phone because, surprise, surprise, I didn't have my work laptop in the ICU. And I'm trying to reschedule that webinar. And as I'm doing that, the nurse at the time, she comes over, she checks my blood. My numbers had finally come back down into, I wouldn't say normal, but more reasonable numbers. And like a 90-degree angle, her readings, my sugars were just spiking crazy just because I was sitting there trying to reschedule that webinar. And she says to me, complete stranger, says to me, you realize that's what put you in this hospital bed in the first place.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that was it. That was my epiphany moment that I needed to hear, a complete stranger. Because, my friends and family had told me, oh, you look stressed and stuff. Yeah, in one ear, out the other. But a complete stranger tells me this. And so then for the next day, I just kind of, sat in that bed and really thought about what I was doing to myself. And I realized that I was trading my health for my career. And in reality, that is a really bad trade, because without your health, nothing else matters. Think about it. When you're really sick, last time that you were really sick, Raul, did you feel like doing anything other than lying in bed?
And just recovering? Nope. Yeah.
That's exactly it. And so when you're like that, where you have no energy, you're no good to your business, you're no good to your spouse, your kids, whatever, because you don't have any energy. You're just lying in bed trying to recover. We can't take our health for granted that way.
No, and that's really important because, well, obviously it goes without saying, like the importance of health. Without the health, we can't do the things that we do, but also having that epiphany moment to have the awareness of what is actually getting at me. And I mean, going back to not to speak ill of any past former leader, but that just shows lack of a toxic, or the presence of a potential toxic environment with a leadership team, and like knowing that you're in the hospital. But so your background knowing in sales and marketing, did that have any, trigger? Is that more of a high stress environment to that enable that, or was it the teams that you were in, or was it just the way that you behaved in regards to how you approached your work that you just went all out?
I think it's mostly 1 and 3. So both, sales, if we think about it, sales, you're always associated with whatever your number is, your monthly number, your quarterly number, your annual number. So you're always stressed to make sure to hit that. With marketing, what happens is everybody gets to see what you do, and everybody is a critic. So, right. And so the thing is, in marketing, what I experienced was that you do everything great, and people say, that's what they expect. But you have one typo on one web page that somebody after 2 months noticed it. And it's like, oh my God, how could that happen? And so the thing is that for me personally, I grew up having this perfectionist mentality. And that is a really bad thing for your health as well, because when you are driving yourself so hard because you keep on thinking, okay, is that good enough? Is that good enough? It's not about being good enough. It's got to be perfect. And that leveling up onto that kind of expectation, inevitably you are going to fail yourself on that, because it's impossible for us to be perfect at everything. So what I always recommend to other perfectionists, and what was an epiphany moment for me too, or a good learning for me too, is if I'm really striving to be great at one particular aspect, let's say of my career, I got to delegate stuff that I'm not good at.
Yeah.
And delegate it to people who can do that work. Because if you keep pushing yourself and you're working on stuff that it's stuff that sure might make a difference, but it's not your expertise, or is something that's taking you away from bigger picture or more relevant stuff for you, you're now tapping into the time factor. And we have a limited number of hours a day. And if we start now falling behind on what we're supposed to do, or what our deadlines, etc., now all of a sudden we start beating ourselves up even more, especially as perfectionists. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it can just get to be really demoralizing.
No, that makes sense. And even looking at it from like my clients who are even working with owners and entrepreneurs, and their perspective is that either you have, when you delegate, there's the anxiety of like, oh, is it going to be done the way that I want it to? Maybe it's not going to be done. Is there
Hmm.
transparency? What's going on? And that can
Hmm.
be maybe too much on the hands-on approach, especially when it comes
Right.
to delegation. And then there's also the too hands-off approach, saying, hey, you got this, take care of it. And then 2-3 months later, you're like, wait, what happened? I thought you got this. I thought you took care
Oh,
of it.
absolutely. So they're in both those aspects. The first one, you're micromanaging. And
Yeah.
if you're micromanaging, people are going to hate you. I mean, it literally, people want to be trusted that they can do the work. Now,
Yeah.
sure, when they're new, et cetera, you want to guide them and make sure they're doing stuff right, but then you let them go. Um, on the other side, where you're so hands off and then you're asking for stress, because if you don't specifically clarify your expectations with them and make sure that they're clear on what they need to get done, if you just assume it's going to get done without having that clarification,
Mhm.
you inevitably, something, as you said, is not going to get delivered as expected, and now all of a sudden you've just created additional stress.
Yeah, the
So
anxiety and stress of both ends. And I think that's something that we want to, like, not attack, but like tackle in this, in our conversation today. Cause I want, but
exactly.
continuing with like your journey, how did you shift? Like not even do like a 180, but how did you shift more now focusing on supporting other leaders and
Mhm.
other, either owners or department heads manage their stress, but also how they approach their teams in stressful situations?
Well, so what I did, after that experience in the ICU,
Hmm.
I realized I got to take care of myself first,
Hmm.
because if I don't, I'm probably not going to be around much longer. So what I did was, I decided, I looked at my finances. I had managed my money properly. So I said, okay, I can do this. And I went ahead and resigned the day after I got out of the hospital. And I started applying a whole bunch of different stress relief tools and techniques.
Hmm.
And what I noticed was that not only did my stress start going down, but so did my glucose numbers. My weight went down and
Hmm.
my energy level went way, way up.
Hmm.
And it was like I had discovered like some sort of fountain of youth.
Mhm.
And what happened was my former peers in my office and stuff, I still was connecting with them. And so they were seeing, wow, you look like a different person. You're acting differently. My friends, my family.
Oh, wow.
And so they all said, you ought to write a book about this. And so I said, okay, I'll go ahead and write a book. I was doing some consulting and I'm writing this book. And then the book became an Amazon bestseller, and said you ought to coach people on this,
Hmm.
because there's so many people out there who don't realize that if they continue to avoid or neglect themselves when their body is specifically telling them, inevitably they're going to have a real negative consequence. So I educated myself on what was going on in the world of stress.
Mhm.
I educated myself on all these different techniques. And interestingly enough, as we were talking about before we started recording, um, there's so many techniques that can work great, but it's not a guarantee. So,
Yeah, that's
something that works for you may not work for me, and vice versa.
yeah.
So it's really important to experiment with several of them until you find one or two that really work well for you. And those are the ones you want to run with.
That's really interesting because I know when reading your bio and understanding where you're coming from, like you have like an arsenal of over like 100 different
Hmm.
strategies that can be deployed, but it's not that you have to use 100 different strategies. And I
Hmm.
do want to dive into maybe some top ones that we can apply and the use case for them. But it's more adapting. What is it that I need?
Hmm.
What are some of my triggers? What are some of the ways that I can approach this, and what would fit best for me? Before we actually dive into some tacticals, what are some of the frameworks or ideas that leaders should be asking themselves, or questions they should be asking themselves in regards to what approach may work best for me, so that when they're hearing some of the tactics that we'll go through, or they're reading additional material, either books or online or articles, what should they be looking out for that would resonate most with them, and how they would because time is scarce, right? They don't want to
Hmm.
waste their time doing the wrong
Right.
things. How do they choose the right, you know, tools or techniques?
So that's a very good question. So there's probably one thing that I want to clarify first for the listeners. One is that there's good stress and bad stress. So so stress itself is a negative word,
Yeah.
but we all need certain stressors to get things done. And if we are happy with what we're doing, let's say our career, our business, et cetera, and we're excited about it, that good stress called eustress, eustress, eustress is the type of stress that we need to get things done, to hit our deadlines, et cetera. And those are the things that we like doing. There's no negative consequences to that. Where we need to be very mindful about is the negative stress that happens either when we ruminate about something in the past, like let's say we feel guilty about something we either did or didn't do, or we're getting anxiety in the future about an event that we think is going to be stressful, but we don't know that. But we are setting ourselves up in our minds that, oh, I'm worrying about this, and I think it's going to be really stressful. And what happens is we manifest a negative outcome instead of taking a more healthy approach.
Yeah.
So I think as long as the listeners understand that from a just kind of a mindset or an awareness standpoint, when there's always early signs of stress, both mentally and physically for us. So mentally, if you start noticing, like, let's say that you have a lack of concentration where you used to be able to focus all the time, or all of a sudden you're having mood swings where you're going from happy to sad or angry at a moment's notice, or you're getting these panic attacks, or as we were talking about, anxiety over something that hasn't happened. Those are clearly signs that you are mentally stressed. Physically, it'll appear in things like, let's say, frequent colds. Instead of maybe one cold every winter, all of a sudden you're getting one cold a month, or back and shoulder stiffness. This one for especially those that work on the computer a lot or are on the phone a lot. What happens is we tend to hunch down when we're stressed. And so our back and our shoulders are going to refer to that. And so that is a very early sign. Having sleep problems, either too much sleep or not enough sleep, is a classic one. Digestive disorders. So no amount of Pepto-Bismol is taking care of it. That's because we manifest a lot in our stomach, or we're reaching for the Excedrin bottle every day or every other day instead of occasionally, because we're waking up with headaches all the time. And then what I noticed right before I got diagnosed with stress-induced diabetes was that weight fluctuations. What happened to me was a month before I was diagnosed, I lost 30 pounds in that 30 days. It was nuts. Raul, I was in my mid 40s, and I wasn't on any particular diet. I was doing my regular exercise, but nothing special. And the weight just started coming off, and I was eating whatever I wanted to eat. And at first I thought, this is awesome. I haven't lost this weight in, how many years since I probably got married. And then all of a sudden, after I hit that 30th pound, I went, I better check to see what's going on.
Month's time frame.
In a month's time frame, and literally not doing anything for that. It just came off. And so what happened was that my blood sugars were running so high that you're burning stuff inside of you that you're not supposed to be burning like that.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. And then got the blood work back, and then went, well, guess what? You got diabetes. So, and the thing is that what a lot of times in the medical field, what they always say is, well, your stress didn't directly cause your diabetes or your cancer or your heart disease.
What's hard to say an attribution factor?
It's what basically happens is in all of those chronic diseases, what causes them is cellular inflammation in our bodies.
Yes.
Well, guess what? One of the number one reasons for cellular inflammation in your body is negative stress. So there is that connection. And so, it's interesting though, because when you start realizing that, okay, there is my body's telling me that I'm stressed, and it's giving you these easy early warnings to say, you better do something about this. If you take action, and literally it only takes 1 or 2 minutes a day in most cases, you can avoid these serious consequences later, but you have to take action. You can't just say, okay, I'll get to it when I get to it, because guess what? When we're stressed
and it's too late. Like when it becomes a problem, right?
Exactly. And then you're forced to deal with it. And guess what? Like for myself, I'm stuck with this disease for the rest of my life. Had I listened, though, to my body back in 2008, or even earlier, way earlier than that, I potentially would have been much healthier.
So then there's two types of stress: the good type of stress that allows us to, work on that project, understand the deadlines, get that workout done, etc. But then there's that negative side of stress, and our bodies and our mind will tell us, depending on our moods, our state of mind, our mood swings, our emotional status, as well as, physically what's going on, sickness, illness, or like you mentioned, fluctuation in weight. And those are just some factors. These aren't the end all be all, but it's good to have those identifying cues. And I remember, to share a side story here, like I remember starting when I first left corporate, like years ago, and then going in like full in with the business and entrepreneurship. That for those 6 months, that was one of the most stressful moments in life, just because it's all new, it's difficult. I remember just waking up with like clenched teeth. So I didn't know a lot of the tactics that we're about to dive into, but I just started burning it, just working out as much as I could and continually to burn what I could, because that was my like go-to, just exercise. But besides that, I do want to dive into specific tactics or tools and techniques that you would recommend and that you work with your clients to not only just be more mindful, but also have proactive stress relief.
It's a good, and what I'd like to do is a couple that they can do that literally take 1 minute. And so one of them is, and so hopefully if your listeners are driving in their car, this is the time where you either pause this or pull over, because I don't want you driving with your eyes closed.
And not listening to it on 2X like I do every podcast.
Exactly. So what you do is you go ahead and close your eyes. So go ahead and do that with me. Close your eyes. You take a deep breath. And I want you to go in your mind to a place you like to relax. Maybe it's the beach. Maybe it's the park. Maybe it's a lake. Maybe it's your backyard. Maybe it's the spa. Wherever it is that you like to relax, go there now in your mind and take in all of your senses. So what do you feel? Do you feel the sun on your face? Do you feel the sand or the grass under your feet? What do you smell? Do you smell the fresh air? Maybe the lotion from the spa? What do you hear? Do you hear the wind blowing through the trees? Maybe the water splashing on shore? And what do you see? Do you see the blue sky? Or maybe the green of the trees or the grass? Whatever it is, take it all in and take another deep breath. And open your eyes. How do you feel?
Yeah, that felt great.
Yeah, and see, it took literally 1 minute, and this is a perfect activity to do. Let's say if somebody has gotten under your skin a little bit, and if you have an office where you can just be quiet for 1 minute, and it just gives you this grounding that you need to help you to not let all of that stress that might be trying to creep in. It does it by doing this grounding and calming yourself. That stress typically doesn't have an easy access into your body.
So this is after an event, right? And after either something that you may react negatively to, right?
Well, what it is it's if you start sensing that these things are getting stressed. And so a perfect example, we're all on these Zoom meetings and somebody says something, right? And all of a sudden it starts to boil your temperature. You just feel it going up. Go ahead. And if you're on the video call, go ahead and close your video, your camera and stuff, and do this for 1 minute and stuff. You'll be so much better. But let's say, you have somebody who is just specifically pushing your buttons, right? And we've all had somebody, at least one, that has done this, right? And what inevitably happens is that we end up saying something that we regret later. And that causes a lot of stress. And so what a great opportunity to do is I call it the stop method. So if you feel your blood is really boiling, so this is level 2 from the visualization. Visualization 1 is you just go ahead and you're calming yourself as you kind of start to feel a little bit. But if you start knowing that temperature gauge is going way up, what you do is you remove yourself from that situation. So you stop, you just remove yourself from that situation. You go somewhere. So like, let's say you, if it was in a situation where you're live with somebody, go to another room, even if it's the bathroom, whatever it is. Observe yourself, how your reactions are, your physical, your emotional. Just be with yourself and just analyze that for a few seconds, maybe a minute. And then what happens is you proceed back to I like to call it the scene of the crime that potentially would be if you said the wrong thing. And you proceed back once you've had a chance to calm yourself. Because if you can do that, and it literally takes 1 to 2 minutes to remove yourself, and then by taking that time away and then coming back, and you can always just say, sorry, I need to go to the bathroom. You don't have to say like, I need to get away from you because I'm going to kill you. It's literally, excuse me, I just need to use the restroom. They won't even know any better. And so it's a really effective thing to stop us from actually saying the wrong thing. Because if you let out something that your frustration and anger, that is something that you didn't intend to say, but it just came out, now you're having to, you're stressed out trying to recover from that. And depending on what you say, it could be devastating. So
and I want to note for the listeners too, this does not mean to shy away from stressful situations or even from showing up as the leader your team needs you to be, or as a team player. Like I remember having Luis Gonzalez on the podcast as well. He talks about having authentic conversations. It's more about how do you have an authentic conversation or confrontation or whatever you need to do, but in the most positive way that you can show up as. And if you're going to show up in a negative state, either angry or attacking the person, not the problem, and it's best for you and for the situation and for the other person, for you to take that moment, recollect. If it's stepping outside the room, doing a short to like 1 minute breathing exercise and looking at a peaceful, calm scene that you enjoy, coming back. Then once you're able to recollect, you can present, you can give, you can deliver, you can confront, you can have the authentic conversation in a much more positive way, which drives the needle forward as opposed to just hits, like just hitting the wall with a hammer.
Oh, absolutely. You said it perfectly and very eloquently. It is true. And then you build trust as a leader as well, because you are exhibiting the habits that the rest of the team will look like and say, okay, I need to follow this too. So it's going to have a positive impact. And people are not going to be fearful about coming to you because they know that you can keep yourself collected. And it's just a really powerful activity. The other one that I always suggest to people, and this one is we can all relate to, let's say we have a very difficult conversation that we have to have with an employee, for example. Maybe we have to fire somebody, or we have to reprimand somebody, or it's just one of these things where we just go, ugh, I can't, I'm really worried. I'm fearful of this. I got a lot of anxiety about this. Well, or let's say we have a presentation, scary thing like that, if we're not comfortable with presenting. Anything like this. Right before you're going to do that activity, you can do this very light meditation that's called hakalau. And hakalau comes from the Hawaiian culture, and it's designed to ground yourself. So again, people who are driving, this is one where you're closing your eyes. So if you want to try it, make sure you're not behind the wheel of a moving car. So what you do is it's very simple. You pick a spot on the wall to focus on, some stationary spot. So go ahead and do that, Raul.
Okay.
And make sure it's above eye level.
Okay.
And as you stare at the spot, just let your mind go loose and focus all of your attention on that spot. And notice that within a matter of moments, your vision begins to spread out, and you see more in the peripheral than you do in the central part of your vision. Now, pay attention to the peripheral. In fact, pay more attention to the peripheral than to the central part of your vision. And stay in this state for as long as you feel comfortable, and notice how it feels. And go ahead and close your eyes, open them back up, coming back into the room. Notice yourself that you're more calm, you're more aware of your surroundings, and doing something like that helps you ground yourself so that you're ready to take on that challenging activity.
It's pretty interesting because all my energy and focus was trying to go on to the peripheral. So is that the idea, to take away every active thought?
So that's exactly it. So what you're basically doing is, as long as you are looking, as you stare at that spot, the hardest part is to just stare at that spot, because if you stare at that spot, your vision automatically starts to spread out. And so if you start looking at the peripheral, what's interesting is it's telling you in your mind to be aware of your surroundings. And so what it is it's taking it away, your thought away from, oh my God, I've got this difficult conversation. And it's basically just grounding you, because your mind is going and thinking, okay, what is around me right now? Now, obviously, you wouldn't want to do this activity if you're in a crowd full of people, because people are going to be moving and stuff like that. And that's going to be more distracting. You want it to be where it's just yourself in the room, because you want the things that you're taking into your peripheral to be stationary as well.
That makes sense. That's pretty interesting. And I do want to ask you a specific, and maybe we can dive into like a custom technique or an idea. But
sure.
I know for a lot of our listeners, we're online entrepreneurs. Everyone's obviously working from home, but there is a lot of that stress of working from home, laptop or desktop, always on a screen all day, making sure that we're checking this Slack message, this email, this LinkedIn inbound message, this Facebook group tweet or Facebook group message, a tweet, etc. So, and there's that part of stress. Then there's that is the other part of stress of that dopamine hit to check, those likes, those comments, those Stripe notifications that you got paid, or invoices that come through. And so there's all these different factors that are happening with our, dopamine, as well as our attention, as well as our focus, and all these conversations happening. When you're working with leaders or owners, even just like team members that have so much coming at them, what are some of the daily practices that we can, exhibit, or, little exercises that we can work through, just to ensure that we avoid the B word, burnout?
It's a great question. So there's a lot of different things. The first that comes to my mind in your description there is something that's really hard for all of us to do, which is to stop working. And so I like to call it an end of day anchor. It really is. And this end of day anchor, it can be anything that signifies as a habit. You have to do this regularly and honor it. Signifies as a habit that you are done working for that day. It might be in the evening, whatever it happens to be. For me, the end of day, the signal is, my wife works at the local hospital. She's part of the COVID response team. So she gets home late. And when I hear the garage door start opening, that is my end of day anchor. So
you're ending work like me at 8:00, 8:30 at night.
Try 9:30. Try 9:30. Yeah, it's but what that is if I'm if I'm currently writing an email, I finish that email and I'm done. If if I'm checking a notification or something, I'm done after that. And that's telling me I'm shutting my computer down. That's number one. Number two is don't have your phone in your bedroom, because you are going to inevitably check the whenever you get notifications.
Email,
And
the Slack, yeah.
exactly. And if I've heard some people say, well, but I need the alarm clock. It's like, well, get a regular alarm clock.
Get a watch.
Or a watch or something like that. But if you just can't be that far from your phone, there's a thing called the Freedom app that basically you can get. And what that does is you tell it when you want it to turn on I can't access my Slack, I can't access my my Facebook, my
like screen
LinkedIn.
time. Yeah.
Exactly. So what it does, but it locks you out of it. So in case you are one of these people that just can't bear not being around it, because you absolutely, it's so critical. We all need to detox from technology with all this stuff going on. And it used to be, when my kids were small, I used to take camping trips, and the purpose of the camping trip was to detox from technology. Yeah. And it was crazy because, you'd go to these campsites and they didn't have Wi-Fi, they didn't have cell service. And, and myself as well, I would go through this detox of the first day, like going, oh my God, what's happening with my business? Oh my God, what's happening here and there? And then the next day would happen. And you know what, Raul? The world didn't end. It's amazing. Yeah. And so you don't have to do a whole day detox. It's great if you can. But what I always recommend to people is, especially when we're around people that are important to us in our lives, is to put the phone away. Mm-hmm. So let's say we're going to have a meal with somebody that's special to us. Put your phone away. Ask the other person to put their phone away. Mm-hmm. It will be amazing how present the two of you will be with each other.
It's important.
Because it's nuts that we've got this, I've heard people refer to it as this Pavlov's dogs kind of reference, where, isn't it crazy that whatever the text is, it doesn't even matter who it's from, but we get a text. And does that take priority over the conversation we're currently having with somebody? Yes. Because we go, oh my God, the phone just buzzed me. What is it?
Yeah, it's the open loop. That's really interesting that you talk about those two things. And that's not only simple to do, but I have, I promote no notifications on your phone, but I definitely would check out the Freedom app and seeing about that. But I do want to talk about the anchor, because I think that's actually, it's really important, because either you're working at an office or you're working at a remote location, or you're just working at, at home. And it's kind of hard to split that personal, business, career, or even just like work lifestyle. Even though you're meshed into one lifestyle, it's one life, but making sure that you have that cutoff time and that trigger that reminds you, hey, this is cutoff time, whatever time you make it to be. And I do like the fact that you have a specific time, because then that kind of has a perhaps positive stress factor. Like, I got to get this done before that happens.
Exactly. And, it's an interesting thing too. My first job out of college was working for FedEx. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking at the couriers who were working there. And, I was in my mid 20s and early, like 23, 24. And I was looking at these couriers, and I came to find out that these couriers looked either my age or in some cases younger. Mm-hmm. And they were 20 to 25 years older than me. And I'm thinking to myself, what is the deal? I figured, okay, so they're getting exercise because they're delivering and picking up packages. And so that's what my assumption was, because we all know that exercise is really important. Here's the thing though. So I asked a few of them. And I said, oh, so I assume it's just the fact that you're getting this exercise. And they said, well, that helps. But the reality is, we have basically really 1 hour of stress in the morning and 1 hour of stress in the afternoon. So in the morning, it's making sure that last hour that they get the packages that have a deadline delivered. And then they have to make sure that they get their van back to the distribution center before a certain time so it gets off to the airport. But this is what they said. They said, after that, we mentally check out and we're not worried about the job anymore. And if you think about that, I mean, us as entrepreneurs, we have all these different things that we're worried about our business. It's very hard to be able to do that. So for a FedEx courier, I'm telling you, these people were so much younger looking because they weren't letting that stress get to them long-term overnight and over again. But it really was for them. After they checked in their packages, that was their end of day anchor. We're done. And so if we think about that, it can be something like I mentioned, the garage door with my wife when she's coming home, but it could be turning off your laptop. It could be getting yourself dinner, right? I mean, it could be that's it. Or maybe it's reaching out and connecting with somebody that you haven't talked to in a while, sending them a text, sending it's just something. And what you can do is, as far as habit forming, set it up for the same time every night,
like a calendar appointment.
Exactly. That's what I do. It's a reminder. In fact, I use my calendar reminders as a very powerful tool to make sure that whatever is in my schedule that's for me specifically to help reduce my stress, that is booked like an appointment. So, we all say, okay, we've got an appointment for this meeting, that meeting and stuff. Well, if there's something important that you need to do for yourself, block it off in your calendar.
You got to do it. Yeah.
You have to.
You got to do it. No, I love that. Well, Professor Pete, for all of our listeners out here, where's the best place for people to learn more of the tools and techniques and learn a little bit more about you?
Sure. It's probably best to just go to my website, which is petealexander.com. I do a weekly stress relief video and blog posts. And all they just do is put their email in there. They can also find out all about stress. And, it's a good resource to have. There's over, now that I've got about 130 different blog posts that they can go and give a quick try to.
No, I love it. Yeah, I would. I just realized we've been going for 40 minutes and I'm respectful of your time, but I would love to keep going on the other 98 techniques that we can do. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Professor Pete, thank you for being on.
Raul, thank you so much for having me on the show, and I really appreciate your listeners' time.